It's always a lot of excitement when Jonathan White presents, and today there's a greater element of surprise than usual since I have no idea what he's going to talk about, except that the title is Future's So Bright, Gotta Wear Shades, which I think is one of the best titles we've had thus far in this course, probably. Most of you probably know a lot about Dr. White, and so I won't go on and on about him. He's given 4 great lectures in this course in the past, and we're looking forward to today very much. So take it away.
How's that? Yeah. So thank you very much, Kim. It's nice to be back. I've been given this talk ever since or given a talk a bit like this ever since the start of this course. I think we did it first over in the University Hospital, right? In a little tiny classroom, with about 2 or 3 people there, I think, I remember. Kim asked me to come back and talk to this, or in this course again, and I kind of said no initially. I said, I've said everything I have to say, why would I want to say anything again? And he asked me to think about it, and I decided to come back and talk about it one more time anyway. Partly because I want to see where this course is going. I want to see where the students in the course are going and kind of what they're thinking, and if it's similar to what I'm thinking. You might say, well, who is this dude? So I'm Jonathan White. I am a surgeon. I work over at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, our kind of standard grungy downtown trauma hospital. And that's 60% of my life. I actually trained in the UK as a surgeon in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and then came to Canada in 2004 to do a fellowship, and then stayed when a job came up here in 2006. That's one side of my life. So, for instance, I was on call Friday and Sunday, just this weekend past. So when you hear somebody's been in a bad car accident and has gone to the hospital, and I'm on call, or when you hear there's been a stabbing or a shooting, I'm probably, if I'm the guy on call, there's 10 of us, but if I'm the guy on call, it's probably coming to me or to someone like me. The other 40% of my job, I'm an associate professor here, and I'm responsible for undergraduate surgical education, and I'm the university's first endowed chair in surgical education as well. So I get to do things like this. I get to come and talk on interesting courses. I get to develop new ways of teaching. I've been pretty successful with something called Surgery 101, which is a podcast that we've done, which has got something like 1.1 million downloads in 175 countries so far. And we're just taking that to the next step now and adding video into it as well. So as I say, I have given a talk a bit like this before. This was the title of the first one, and you can tell I didn't really know what I was talking about in the first one because the title's way too long. It's actually, there's 2 titles. Biological Repairman's Reflections on the Coming Singularity, talking about embodiment in the age of spiritual machines. And then the second time I talked about technology in the body, focusing largely on that relationship between technology and bodies, and talking about kind of where we're going and what might it mean for us. Then I did a third talk where I was talking about kind of personal aspects of the singularity, what singularity might mean to individuals. And then last time, in fact, between the third talk and the fourth talk, I actually went to the fountainhead. I went to the source of all singularity knowledge. I went to Singularity University down in California, down in NASA Ames, close to Mountain View. And actually went to Future Med for a week and saw some of the people who are advancing the singularity, and came back and gave this talk with more questions than answers, I think, than ever about the singularity. So I guess why did I bother to come back? Like, Kim has put the previous lectures on YouTube, and I'm sure you can look at them there. Maybe you have questions about the ones that you've seen there. I guess I'm happy to come back and kind of explain and discuss my point of view a little bit more. I don't think I'm a singularity pessimist. I don't think I'm a singularity optimist, though. I think I'm turning into kind of a singularity realist. And it's nice to come back and give this talk every so often and kind of see where my thinking is at as we go along. And I'm kind of interested in where your thinking is at in this as well. So, as I said, I am a surgeon. This is a picture of me in the operating room, theatre number 2, in the Royal Alexandra Hospital. This is one of the promotional things we did for Surgery 101. I've got a surgical instrument in one hand and an iPhone on the other hand. And I didn't think about this at the time, but it does kind of fairly well describe my career to date. Half of it is operating on people. The other half is being interested in technology and gadgets and communication, that sort of thing. It's interesting, when I was down in Future Med, I had a chance to play with some of the Arduino kits, like some of the electronics, and to talk to some of the people who are at the forefront of what's become known as the maker movement, like the people who are building physical objects. I got to play with a 3D printer. And I think my dad would be very proud of me. My dad is, or was, I suppose, before he retired, an electrical engineer. And he's very impressed that I'm playing with wires and resistors and stuff. I have to say, I didn't really find it that engaging. I think I'm not so much interested in the physical side of technology as I am in the communications and information transfer side of technology. I'm much more interested in things like wikis and blogs and Facebook and Twitter than I am in physical wires and resistors and stuff. And I mean, I could afford a 3D printer, right? I could go out and buy a 3D printer if I really wanted one. I'm not sure that I actually need one at this point. Maybe if they were $100. Maybe, in fact, the MakerBot just came out with their 3D scanner. So you can now put an object in the scanner, press the button, and then take the 3D model from that and put it into your printer and print it out. And it's something like, I think it was a shock to me just how much it was. The printer itself is $1,500 or $2,000, and the scanner something like the same cost. Like the scanner is the same cost as the printer. The prices will come down eventually, but at the moment I don't think 3D printing's ready for prime time. That's just me speaking as a kind of technology junkie. I am very interested in this thing, though. I am very interested in bodies, and I don't quite remember when I got interested in the body. I think maybe it was in high school doing a course called Human Biology. But really, my entire career to date as a surgeon is about exploring what the body's made of and opening it up and seeing what the matter is and taking things out. I mean, Kim's career to date has been actually the part after that, where I chop it out and send it off to the lab, he chops it up and looks at it down the microscope. So we're both kind of interested in bodies in different ways. And I suppose, I mean, the entire field of medicine is based on the fact that the body isn't very good. Like, it breaks down and it wears out and it gets cancer and it gets stabbed and it bleeds and it dies. And medicine tries to fix that, I suppose. Surgery tries to fix that as well. And I guess that was why I was interested in giving the talk first time around, talking, because I'm thinking about bodies, I'm thinking about technology. This is a slide I use with the first year medical students, which I've used in a couple of the talks so far about why biology is a good thing. It is free. You don't have to pay for it. When you're born, you get a free body. Excellent. It is familiar, like you're fairly used to your body. It's not unusual or strange to you at all. They do replicate themselves, and mostly they are self-repairing. As a surgeon, I consider myself, most of my job is like a recovery maintenance supervisor. Like, I do the operation, but then afterwards the patient recovers by themselves. We kind of help them and we do certain things to speed it up sometimes. But really the body heals itself, so it kind of repairs itself. It's got a long battery life. Like, if I told you you're going to buy an iPhone today and it could run for 100 years, you'd be surprised. Like, run 100 years on a single charge. That's pretty good. It does look after itself. And we talk to the medical students about this, about homeostasis and the autonomic nervous system. You don't need to worry what your blood pressure is right now. You don't need to worry what your heart rate is like. You don't need to worry what your oxygen saturation is like, or what your respiratory rate is like, because your body takes care of all that. Obviously, you have to get involved when your bladder fills up or when you have to go to the bathroom or something. You have to get involved in a cognitive way when you're hungry and you have to go and eat something. But in general, the body kind of looks after itself. As I say, it is familiar. It's been refined over, I think, what most civilized minds consider as millions of years of evolution. So this is a pretty big deal in evolutionary biology, the opposable thumb. And standing up like this is pretty good, and walking back and forth is pretty good. And then the best thing about the consequence of evolution is the human brain, right? So those are pretty good things. I mean, I was watching a TED talk the other day on from a neuroscientist, and he said he gives a course on neurology and neuroscience, and he says he gives the students a textbook which is like 1,000 pages and weighs 7 pounds, all about the human brain. And he said he thinks he's giving the students the wrong message. He thinks when he hands them that textbook, he's making them think that we understand the brain in some way, that all the knowledge about the brain must be in this 1,000-page, 7-pound textbook. And in fact, based on that, he developed a course actually on scientific ignorance and the encouragement of ignorance, and said, well, we actually, as very advanced neurobiologists, we don't really have much of a clue about how the brain works. That's how good it is. That's how good the brain has evolved over the years. Of course, the good side of biology is there's really nothing much, there's no alternative to it at the moment. You don't like your body? Tough, suck it up, buttercup. You are stuck with this thing for now. The downside is it's unreliable and it's fragile, and I can testify to that. If you get hit by a bus tonight and you have a certain amount of bleeding, or you have the right part of your body injured, you're dead and you're not coming back. And we don't like high temperatures, we don't like low temperatures, we don't like radiation, we don't like vacuum, we don't like the deep part of the ocean, we don't like environments with no oxygen. We're looking at the search for planets across the galaxy and kind of figuring out, well, can we find the Goldilocks planet? Can we find the planet that's just like our planet here? Because we're evolved to work in this environment. We don't work well in other environments. Unlike your iPhone, there's no backup function. If I destroy my iPhone today, I go back and put my new iPhone from the store into the Mac, and I get everything back, all my contacts, all my songs on iTunes. There is no backup function. If I get killed in a car crash tonight, I'm gone and I'm never coming back. There's no restore. There's no warranty, and it's single use only. And if you get a defective unit, you cannot return it to the maker in any meaningful sense. And that means if you happen to be born with a congenital heart defect, that means you only live for a few minutes. That's it. You don't get another go around. At least not in our kind of conception of spirituality. I say it's got a long shelf life, long battery life, but a limited shelf life. And it does go off eventually. Some of the basic functions are kind of messy, like having to chop up other dead animals and treat them with heat so that we can eat them, or do the same with dead plants. Also, the residue from dead plants and animals are a bit messy as well, and we have to pee and poop. There's no way around that. Everybody has to do that. I mean, I'm a colorectal surgeon. I spend my life talking to people about farting, pooping, and shitting, right? That's just, I'm very familiar with the basic functions, as are we all. Making new units is fun, but it is slow. So if you went to Rogers tonight and said, hey, can I have a new iPhone? They said, yes, come back in 9 months. You'd be a bit disappointed, because it takes a while for new ones to come along. And the processor speeds are fairly limited. Like, I would like to do 14 things at the same time, and I can't. In fact, I think there's good evidence now. There's no such thing as multitasking. You actually cannot do 2 things at the same time. There's something called rapid task switching, where you go from one task to another very quickly and then back again. So it looks like you're doing multiple things. You're not really. The neurobiologists say you're only doing one thing at one time. And there's a limited capacity for upgrades. We can do, I saw a thing recently where somebody had done a kind of a simulacra of all the different artificial organs. And they had an artificial heart, and I think they had some kind of artificial kidney, an artificial liver. I think they hadn't come up with an artificial spleen or something. We don't really have a capacity to upgrade much about the human body, even if we wanted to. So biology's not the be-all and end-all. And certainly, I mean, these are the 2 books by Kurzweil that got me started thinking about all this. And it's that title at the top, which you can't see on that slide. It's Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near, and at the top in blue it says, When Humans Transcend Biology. So here am I, surgeon with an interest in technology, very familiar with the body, and I hear Kurzweil talking about transcending biology, about getting rid of or going beyond biology in some way, and that's really what got me interested in the first place. The other thing, of course, is I'm a big fan of science fiction. So, and Philip K. Dick is what I would consider is probably one of the complete top rank, one of the masters of science fiction. This is his classic Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is made into Blade Runner later on. I'll come back and talk about Philip K. Dick later on. Of course, as with most, or as with many geniuses, Philip K. Dick died before he was really acclaimed as being such a fantastic writer. There's a great story about Philip K. Dick about how to build a universe that doesn't collapse by lunchtime, where he talks about what it was like to live in the 60s and live and eat horse meat rather than proper food. He had to go to the pet store and buy his food from there because he was so poor. So I spent a lot of my teenage years reading people like Philip Dick, and then I think when I went to medical school I kind of stopped science fiction, and then more recently I got into some newer authors. Ian Banks, who's just died actually, with his Culture series. I think he finished the 15th book, The Hydrogen Sonata, which I'm reading at the moment. And then Greg Bear, who's a bit more into hard science fiction. Greg Bear was a physicist, I think, before he became a writer. And I think Blood Music was about the Singularity before it was called the Singularity. I can talk a bit more about that if you like. As I say, I've become over the years more interested in the body's connection and relationship with information as well, like how we cope with the amount of information in the world today. I was meeting with another scholar from another part of the world yesterday, and at the end of our meeting I said to him, so what do I do if I need to get in touch with you? And he said something that really surprised me. He said, I don't have email. I said, what's your email address? He said, I don't have email. I said, well, how am I supposed to get in touch with you? He said, well, I'll go back home and I'll write you a letter, and then you can write me a letter. And I'm like, wow, you don't have email? Like, I don't know how many times a day I check my email. Like when I wake up, and then I guess, hundreds of times a day, certainly. And texts as well, and updates from Facebook, and people who tweet on Twitter, and all sorts of stuff. I mean, we're living, at least I'm living, in this giant sea of information. It was interesting, I went home for a couple of weeks back to Northern Ireland. We were living in a house that did not have the internet. It did not have wireless access at all. And we had to go to other people's houses. We had to go to other family members' houses to access their wireless networks. And it's interesting how much of the stuff that comes in all the time that's kind of distracting you from daily, everyday life is just what my wife would call piff, or complete piffle. Like it's beneath your notice. Like you look at 100 of these and there's maybe one or two interesting things in it. There's just a giant amount of information. And this giant information slush that comes at us all the time that we really have little control over. There's a nice book I read a while ago called The Information Diet, A Case for Conscious Consumption. We say it's not enough to just sit and be switched on to information all the time. We have to think about our relationship with the information in a slightly more formal way. And this is where I am at the moment. I bought Grand Theft Auto 5 last night for the PlayStation. And I know I shouldn't have, because I didn't finish Grand Theft Auto 4 yet. I also haven't finished the Batman Arkham game. I finished Battlefield 3. I haven't finished Call of Duty. I haven't even started Dead Space 2. And I didn't finish Infamous 2 either. So I've got a stack of stuff. And Netflix is making it worse, actually, because now there's stuff that I've seen before that I want to see again on Netflix that I could watch. Apparently I've got to watch Orange is the New Black. That's the latest thing, right? But I haven't seen any of that yet. I can get that on Netflix. Got a stack of books. I've got a stack of DVDs. And I think my reach exceeds my grasp when it comes to information. I'd like to live a couple of lives and experience all of this, all of these different experiences. But at the moment, I'm kind of limited by the processing power of my body, sadly. I like these two quotes from a couple of technologists, and Brian Ferrin and William Gibson. I think William Gibson isn't described on Wikipedia anymore as an author. He's described as a noir prophet, apparently, because he's the person who came up with the idea of cyberspace. He said the future's already here, it's just not widely distributed yet. And I think that's at least one reason why you should look, why it's at least defensible to look into the future a little bit and see, well, what are the new things that are coming, and what might they be like in a little while longer. Of course, I mean, the other reason to be interested in the Singularity is because you'd like to stick around for a bit longer. I like this one about longevity. I've always said I don't want to live forever. I'm not ready to go tomorrow either. I don't think anybody wants to live forever. But if somebody said to you, well, you could live a little bit longer, you'd probably say yes. Probably say, well, I'll go to 150 and see what happens. I want to see who wins the World Series next year, you know. I want to see who wins the World Cup 4 years down the road. And I think that's where the singularity comes in as well. I mean, Ray Kurzweil's come into a lot of criticism for saying that he would like to help develop the technology that can bring dead people or people back from the dead. And it's his father that he wants to bring back from the dead, apparently. So, and this is regarded as a very laughable thing and how ridiculous, and we shouldn't take him seriously at all. But at least he's thinking outside the box, right? So, this is the slide I've used before, talking about the about kind of options for biology. Starting at the top with something that's fairly familiar to us, which is trying to understand biology. It's a bit frustrating actually trying to understand biology because our current grasp on it is very limited. I was reading a paper recently that said, I think my wife told me this, there was something like 16 different molecular subtypes of breast cancer that all look the same down the microscope. And it turns out they all respond differently to treatment. So what we thought was one form of a disease is actually lots of different diseases inside that box, and that's just one sort. And it may be that when people get cancer or when people get degenerative diseases, it's actually an individualized disease. And what's happening in their body is different from somebody else, at least at a molecular level, from somebody else who's got cancer or arthritis or something else. So it turns out biology is really quite complicated. If we can then understand biology in some meaningful way, then perhaps we can control it. And this is where advanced pharmaceutical comes in. This is where maybe nanotechnology comes in. There's some work being done currently on augmentation, actually augmenting parts of the body. Talking about people like Oscar Pistorius would be the classic example of that. Someone who lost their legs and now has an augmentation to replace those legs. And then the bottom three parts there are much more speculative. The idea that you could back up your body or your consciousness or whatever you are somewhere and then be brought back again after you've been backed up into some other sort of a substrate. The idea that you could actually abandon a physical substrate entirely. The idea that you could actually somehow exist in something outside what you or I would call a body in general. And then the last piece is what Kurzweil talks about when he talks about transcendence, which is he talks about saturating the local space-time continuum with information. He talks about basically using up all of the informational capacity in this region of the continuum, which is quite a hard thing to grasp. Not just not living in your body, not living in any body at all. So that's a kind of tough one. People are writing about this, so I've actually met both these guys down in California now. Peter Diamandis has written a book called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, where he says, people are worried about war and disease and pestilence and different things. And he says those things won't happen because things will become more abundant. The price of services and goods will drop towards zero. People will tend to become more free and more liberated as time goes on. And then Kurzweil, this is Kurzweil's latest book about how to create a mind, the secret of human thought revealed. He thinks he's got a fairly good grasp on what happens in the brain and how minds are constructed. And in fact, he's working for Google now, down in Mountain View. The future's not all completely rosy, though. There are some people who are kind of pointing out some problems with where we are at the moment and with where we might go next. There's a book called Distracted, about just what I was talking about how we're distracted from the parts of our lives that should really matter. We're distracted from the activities that we're doing by information. And it's interesting sometimes when you see people waiting around for things. For instance, if there's 3 or 4 of us on a surgical team waiting to do an operation, and the patient's not quite ready yet, what would have happened would have been we would have gone to get a cup of coffee and we would have sat down and we would have talked for a while. We might have done some teaching or something. Now usually what happens is before there's even a suggestion of that, all the devices come out. your device like that, and you're checking your email, you're checking your text, you're playing, Candy Crush Saga, whatever your latest thing is, because the device is there and you don't want to miss anything, right? Maybe there was a news update from CNN, or maybe your friend was testing you about something. And there was a nice study about the use of mobile devices like the iPhone in hospital wards. And the nurses, and it was the doctors who had the devices, and the nurses were commenting on this, and the nurses said that the doctors were more globally aware of what was going on. They were getting information about their patients, but they were less locally present. And a nurse tells a story about how she's in the middle of a conversation with the doctor, who gets a text and turns away as she's in mid-sentence. Doesn't even say, hey, I have to get this text for a minute. And you see this in restaurants sometimes, people checking their email in the middle of a meal, or it's like we're addicted, or we're in love with information in some way, and we turn away from the people that are in front of us. Nicholas Carr's written about the effects of technology on our brains, and his thesis is actually that there's a change in our neurobiology, like a change in our actual brain activity, and to some degree our brain anatomy, because of the internet. He says that the way you read a page on the internet is different from how you read a page like made of paper. And he talks about the difference between, previously he says, you would have descended into information like you were a deep-sea diver, like kind of diving deeply into things and understanding them. And that's a slow process, going down slowly, coming back and up slowly. He says that now with the internet, our relationship with information is much more like the guy on the jet ski who's bumping along the surface and who never really gets down into the deeper levels of understanding. I know I had a medical student ask me a while ago in front of the class, how much of the information that you've learned to be a doctor came from Wikipedia? I graduated in '93, so there was no Wikipedia back then. I said, well, none. And they said, well, our answer to that is about 25%, or maybe 50% of their medical knowledge they perceive as coming from something like Wikipedia. And it's not that I think Wikipedia is a bad thing. I mean, I don't use Wikipedia to decide what operation to do, or what drug to give someone, or how to treat a patient, or what to do in a situation. If I don't know anything about a particular condition or syndrome or topic, then I think it's reasonable to use Wikipedia. But I don't consider myself an expert on that topic, simply because I kind of dipped into the surface of the information. This is another author writing about basically how technology is kind of dividing us from each other. She talks about being alone together, why we expect more from technology and less from each other. And people's relationships are primarily with their devices and not with the people around them to a certain degree. This is an older quote from Carl Sagan, who warns about the dangers of technology. He says, we've arranged a global civilization in which all the important stuff is based on science and technology. That's fine. But we've also arranged things so that almost nobody actually understands what's going on with the science and technology. He says, we might get away with it for a bit, but sooner or later, this mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces. So if my car doesn't work on the way home tonight, there's nothing I can do about that. I've got to call the towing company and get it towed to the shop. And then the guy in the shop, he probably doesn't know what's the matter with it either. He has to actually hook the laptop up and do a diagnostic. And the diagnostic will then tell him which part to fix, because he doesn't really have a good grasp on how the engine works any more than I do. I don't know how my iPhone works. I know I touch it. I know things come up on the screen. I don't really understand what's happening on the inside. If you opened it up and showed it to me, it wouldn't do me any good. So I think to a certain degree, technology is getting away from everyday understanding, and that's okay. Technology gets more complicated as it goes along, perhaps. But Carl Sagan was a bit worried about that. I found this just at the weekend, and it's a collection of people. It's actually a Google Doc that was shared through Boing Boing, one of my favorite websites, and it shows you kind of where the thinking on the singularity is at the moment. People are talking about alternatives to the singularity, and wondering about have they had enough of the singularity? And it was reopened just October 21st, just this week. So you can actually go onto the Google Doc and edit it and add some stuff for yourself. It's a big long URL, so if you just look alternatives to the singularity, you'll find that. And there's about I think there's probably 70 or 80 of these. I just thought I'd show you a few for fun. And the basic idea is the singularity is boring. We had enough of the singularity already. Blah, blah, blah. What else could there be? So there's the crapularity. So for the crapularity, you combine 3D printing plus spam email plus microprinting. And you get basically tribbles that you get billed for, replicating wildly out of control. 90% of the world turns into rubbish. It's all in your spare room, which you're forced to rent through Airbnb. And there's a pile of worthless crapjacks on the side. Or you can have the Grouponularity. This is based on Groupon. So you add up aggregate consumer purchasing power plus pricing algorithms plus applied captology, which allows your mother to reduce the price of all goods in the world to zero. But unfortunately, that's all jet ski adventure days, bread makers, and underwhelming, or meals in underwhelming restaurants, combining Groupon with the singularity. There's the duolarity. This is a beautiful people drinking cocktails in walled cities, surrounded by feral slums full of dirty, angry preteens. So, a bit like H.G. Wells with the Morlocks. The anonularity. This is combining anonymous with the singularity. A crowdsourced anonymous social network becomes self-aware, and it removes the identification of anybody on the internet, and then ends itself through self-anonymization. Or you've got the lolcatularity, otherwise known as the catrix, where cats have completed their plan of gaining control over all commerce on the internet. Humans are enslaved and allowed to live only to support the needs of cats or for the amusement of cats. You've also got the whatever-ularity, which is whatever happens, happens, and nobody really notices. The textularity, in which we're also busy writing, editing, tagging, clustering, ranking, converting, versioning, that it becomes the basis of all of our economic and political activity. The Luddite-ularity, everybody gets fed up with the virtual this and the cloud that, and starts actually socializing face-to-face in a brand new retro fad. And then my favorite, which is the discombobularity, where utter confusion reigns and no one has any idea what the hell's going on anymore. So, and these are not my slides. These are slides from Boing Boing and from Google Docs. And say there's about 60 or 70 more of these. And I think it's interesting to see people are kind of taking the piss with the singularity slightly, right? They've got to the point now where we're kind of mocking it, we're satirizing it a bit, which I think is actually quite a good thing. So as I say, at the moment when I think about the future, I think about singularity, I do have more questions than answers, and I do have maybe a more critical view than I used to have. I mean, this is one of my slides from the previous talks where, I think it's naive to say that technology will fix everything. I think it might even be naive to say technology will fix anything of any importance. Because some of the easy problems are fixable with technology, but some of the harder problems are actually within ourselves, and we probably can't fix those things very easily. Some of the technology we need, say for cheap food or clean water, in places of the world where they don't have those things, are available already. There isn't going to be some magical technological revolution that's going to bring those things. We have them already, and we haven't used them to fix very much so far. I think this is one of the most lazy and kind of pathetic examples of the singularity. I've been at meetings before where somebody just says, well, don't worry, we're on an exponential curve, it'll sort itself out, right? We'll just double, it'll just keep going and it'll be fine, don't worry too much about the details. I don't know, in the time that I've been giving this talk, I don't think the world is really much different. If we're on this bit of the curve, this is a logarithmic scale and the line's bending up there apparently according to Kurzweil. If we're on a logarithmic scale like that, I would expect to have seen something in the last 2 or 3 years. I'd like my phone to be going twice as fast, right? I'd like my email filter to be twice as good. I'd like the stuff on Netflix to be twice as cheap. I like lots of things, and I don't see that happening. And I think the future doesn't just happen by itself. Someone has to make it happen. And just trusting the exponential curves doesn't really seem to make much sense to me. I know Sean Apandi has talked a bit about this, about big data being the solution. I don't think we have the capacity to really understand what big data is and how big data can be used. I mean, I talked to somebody who sequenced his whole microbiome, who sequenced all the DNA of all the bugs who live in his gut. And I said, congratulations, that's excellent. Like, so what? What do you want to do with it? You know how many species of this you've got in your colon and how much of that you've got in your small bowel? How is that of any practical use to anybody, you know? We will, this kind of perfect version of the world where we'll take new technology and we'll do amazing things with it because we're going to get quicker and faster and cheaper and better all the time. The issue, of course, is that it's just us who's responsible for using this, and I don't see any sign of us getting exponentially wiser or kinder over the years. I was actually shocked that America didn't invade Syria, or didn't bomb Syria. Because I was pretty sure, given the way world politics has worked out in the past, that America would put itself in a position where it had to do something. And somehow or other, between it and Russia, they actually managed to work out the sensible thing. And I think that's the exception rather than the rule. I think there's not a lot of wisdom around, there's not a lot of kindness around. And we're talking about technologies are going to be more and more powerful as time goes on, used by people who have the same old neuroses and anxieties. This is the kind of Californian idea that we will field test these ideas in California, and then somehow we will harness this technology to advance the cause of all the people in the world. And I don't think that's how innovation rolls out. I think it's people who have the money who get it first, people who have the status and the privilege and the power who get it first. And there's really no economic imperative to roll it out to people who can't pay for it. So I kind of think it's very nice to say that the rising tide of technological advancement will advance all of us. I don't think it's very likely. I kind of wonder in this course, and I wonder for myself, like, why are we here? Why are we having a course about technology and the future of medicine? Are we kind of obsessed with the future? If you were to go back, when I visited the UK in the last couple of weeks, I met some people who live on a farm, and they don't have wireless networks. They don't have rapid access to information. They live the way people used to live, maybe not that long ago, and they seem happy enough actually. They're not that interested in what's happening with the future. They're not interested in the latest technological developments. If you go back 100 years and said to somebody, well, what will the future be like? You'd say, well, my son or my daughter will grow up to do pretty much the same as what their mom or dad did. And the generations will just be like that. There's not a huge history of future studies. We went back to people in 1900 and said, what do you think about the 2000s? They would say, what do you mean? I don't understand what you're talking about. In fact, there have been movements in the past where we talk about La Belle Époque, talk about fin de siècle at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, where people said all the progress in the world that's going to be made has been made already. I can't remember if it was one of the physicists, I think maybe Rutherford, said that they had discovered everything that they were going to discover. Things were about as good as they were going to get, and they were pretty damn good, thanks very much. And that was before Einstein came along and ruined it all with relativity, of course. But if you're wondering, why are you here? Maybe it's because you want to be ready, like you're trying to figure out where the next curveball is going to come from, and if you can kind of see where things are going to go and kind of jump on that bandwagon, then it'll help you move down the road a little bit. Wayne Gretzky, it's important to know which way the puck is moving. So if I can see the developments that are coming, I can take advantage of it in some way, or I can get ahead of other people or get a competitive advantage. Maybe being worried about the future is kind of this triumph of hope over experience. We're kind of hoping for better things in the future, even though we're not 100% sure that we're going to get there. Maybe it's because we just want the new version of the iPhone. We want to see what's next. Don't show me the iPhone 6 or the iPhone 7. Show me the iPhone 10. Show me the iPhone 100, please. I want to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I want the latest version of everything. What's next? Thinking about the future is easier than making the future. And in fact, wondering where the puck is going to is easier than having to actually get on the ice and move the puck for yourself. Maybe that's why we're interested in the future. Or maybe it's kind of it's wish fulfillment. Maybe if we wish hard enough for the future, maybe we think it'll come true in some way. Maybe that's why we're kind of worried and thinking about the future. I want to ask you a question. What do you see when you see this image? What does this image suggest to you? Setting sun, okay. What else?
Taking a risk.
Taking a risk, okay.
I guess you're about to go into the dark, right? You don't know what's going to happen when the sun actually sets. You won't be able to see anything.
Okay.
I guess sort of helplessness after that, right? Going into the unknown.
So you see the coming darkness, okay. Right.
I actually saw it as the morning, kind of what
Sunrise,
you see.
okay.
Yeah, just before going a good day of diving or out on the ocean.
So somebody thinks sunset, somebody thinks sunrise, okay.
It just looks like nature, like natural to me.
Yeah, it's natural, okay. Yeah, it's kind of it doesn't project very well. I think there's a beach in the foreground and then there's the sea, right? Any other suggestions?
I think I immediately just see that it's wide open, which kind of makes me think about possibilities. But it's also kind of boring, like the sea's calm, there's nothing going on, so.
Yeah, and there's no people in the picture, right?
Yeah.
Don't see anybody. So I show this to you just to show you, I mean, that you can look at the same thing and see different elements in it. Actually, I just Googled sunrise on Google this morning. This is one of the top pictures that came up when I put it up. So you could look at this and think it's a hopeful thing, right? The sun isn't up yet, but it's going to come up and then the world will be brighter and better. And nature is there, right? People aren't there, which is nice. Or you could say it's the sunset, it's something going down, it's something ending, it's the finish of something. I don't know. I think sometimes focusing exclusively on the future, focusing exclusively on what the sun will be like when it's going to come up, is a bit silly. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to go to a future day celebration, because it'd be like going to Stonehenge and watching the sunrise at midsummer. I mean, I'm not affecting the sun. The sun is going to rise whether I'm watching it or not. And the future's coming whether we celebrate Future Day or not as well. So to a certain degree, I think we have to get out of the idea of kind of worshipping the future and thinking about the future as something that's going to come and save us and help us. Because the trick with this is you're going to have to pull the sun up behind the scenes yourself. You're going to have to make the future for yourself. Which brings me back to Philip K. Dick, actually. If you look at what Philip K. Dick wrote, and in fact, I think there was a good book I read last year called Among Others, which is the story of a girl growing up in a life full of science fiction, and she references about, I think, 50 or 60 classic works that she's reading as she goes through the story. Most excellent science fiction is not about tomorrow. Most excellent science fiction is a story set in tomorrow, but it's really all about today. It's really all about us and about what's happening to us right now, viewed through the lens of tomorrow. So, for instance, Philip K. Dick, the two big themes that he talked about is, what does it actually mean to be human? What does it mean to be properly human? Which is where Diamandis' dream of electric sheep came from with Decker and the replicants and everything. And the second theme that he had is, what is reality? Like, what is really real? Things like Ubik, things like Valis, things like A Scanner Darkly. What is reality actually composed of? And those were vital questions that he wanted to answer to today, that he used science fiction to address. So what would I like to see? I'd like to see us think a little bit less about the future and a bit more like the present, I suppose. To fix the things that could actually make more difference today using technology we already have. Don't wait for California to make your 3D printer. Go and do something for yourself with stuff that already exists. I don't like this kind of one world view of the singularity. I don't like the fact that a solution could be found that would fit everybody all the way around the world. I actually think if progress is remade, it's going to be local solutions. Going to be local communities and people deciding things for themselves. I think it's very interesting what happened last night in Edmonton and in the election. In fact, I was reading on the way over here, Paula Simons of the Edmonton Journal was saying that Toronto should be looking at Alberta now and being very worried, because we've got a fantastic mayor in Calgary, a fantastic mayor in Red Deer, and a fantastic mayor-elect in Edmonton. Compared to their mayor in Toronto, it looks like Alberta's kind of, at least Edmonton, is kind of turning the corner and embracing the future. Very much about local decision making. I think further advances in technology will be limited by our understanding of human psychology and human sociology, and really we need to figure out how to be better human beings, I think. And I don't know, I think we have to just do the best that we can in fairly disruptive times. Whatever happens in the next 20, 30, 40 years between now and whenever the singularity comes, if it ever comes, I think it's going to be interesting. It's an interesting time to be alive. I'm glad I wasn't born in 1900. I'm glad I was born when I was, because I think it's going to be interesting and it's going to be disruptive and things are going to change. So I wanted to leave you with some questions for discussion. If you want, we can talk. I've got a bit of time at the end, so we can talk about why are you interested in the future? What would you like it to be like? What do you think it's going to be like? It's probably going to be different than what you would like. And how do you get from there to here? Thank you very much.
So, there seem to be very few certainties in life, but one that seems to be emerging is the importance of open questions. That if you try to teach children by making them memorize facts, they're not very keen on that and they don't learn very well. If you have them figure out things on their own, they learn much better. It's better in every way. And really, this lecture and this whole course is all about open questions. If you had to kind of distill it down into one idea, we every single time talk about questions that we don't have any answer to right now, today. And I think that's probably of value. I'll tell you something quite amusing and recent about Future Day that I just discovered today. The next March 1st is on a Saturday. And I don't know for all of you in this room what Saturdays are like, but they're a little bit special socially, right? I don't think I can compete actually with whatever you already have planned for that Saturday, with whatever I put together for Future Day. Well, it turns out that the Canadian Society of Transplantation 2014, their meeting ends on Saturday, March 1st in Montreal. So it's very unlikely that I could have any successful big, event with people that I know here on March 1st. So we're going to have to be flexible. I'm not saying we're canceling Future Day, but I think Future Day can't be March 1st. It has to be March 4th. March 4th is a Tuesday. It's a day on which this course is taught, and it's a day on which all my friends will be at that meeting in Montreal, will be back. So I have not given up, but you should also realize this does look like a not a very successful effort. The 3 years that I've been involved in Future Day, the number of worldwide celebrations of Future Day has consistently gone down. I think it was 18, 12, 10, something like that. So we presume that when we celebrate Future Day in 2014, there'll be fewer than 10 other cities celebrating it. So I think that your lecture is extremely important in providing a kind of balance, and it's a balance of other people's lectures, it's a balance of your own lectures also. So it's pretty cool looked upon.
See, Kim, I would argue every day is Future Day.
Yes.
Every day the sun rises, we should celebrate that and move into the future just by a tiny step.
Sure.
I think that the idea of a kind of an annual celebration is, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Personally, I think. But But every day the sun comes up and you're still breathing is a good day.
Yes. Well, we'll see what happens, but it's going to have to be a kind of compromise. Future Day 2014. Okay. Any student questions? Come on, there must be some.
I just have a random question. What made you choose the title "The Future's So Bright, Gotta Wear Shades"?
Because I'm a fan of film of the 1980s, right? Film music of the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s. I think that's where it comes from, I think.
So some of the alternatives to Singularity, like the lolcatularity and the grouponularity, they kind of have a similar theme that you kind of touched on later on about understanding human psychology and sociology. Do you think that a lot of this kind of realist or bordering pessimistic side of singularity in the future has to do with lack of kind of distributing information and education and kind of social awareness?
Possibly. I think maybe it has to do with our misunderstanding about what we actually want. I saw a nice cartoon on Facebook a couple of days ago where I think it was on Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal or XKCD, and somebody comes in. I think this guy's at the computer, and his mother comes in and says, "You shouldn't spend so much time on the internet. You should get out. You go and see people." And he says, "No, no, no. The internet is so fantastic. I'm broadening my horizons. I'm connecting with people. I have this big social network, and I'm becoming a better person through the internet." And his mother says, "Okay, that sounds good," and she goes out. And then in the last frame, he pulls up pictures of cats, and he's spending all day looking at pictures of cats, right? And you could look at this in a pessimistic way and say, the internet is for cats and it's for porn, and that's it, right? I mean, really, if you look at what most bandwidth is dedicated to, it's not about clean water for Africa. It's not about social accountability or social justice. It's about fairly basic kind of nasty human needs, which is entertainment and titillation. So how do we take a medium that's kind of developed by itself? I mean, I think it's fantastic. The internet is freely available. It's been kind of fairly unregulated. There's been a discussion this week on Facebook about beheading videos, right? And Facebook has said, well, actually, we're okay with having videos which show graphic violence be present on Facebook, and it's created a big political storm because people want to see that sort of stuff. And how do you take those kind of base human instincts and try and do something a bit more constructive with it? And I don't know.
Yeah, because it kind of makes me think that like we have the technology and the tools and the instruments to make, the idea of the singularity, but the basic infrastructure is kind of what your lecture was kind of talking about. And that is a problem that I don't really see. Yeah, like you said, I don't know how that's going to be corrected necessarily.
And there's a slightly different strain of talking in the singularity sometimes. There was a guy that I met down in California who said that the reason why we do bad things, or things we're not very proud of sometimes, is because there's a problem with our brains. And he said, what we need to do is just alter our brains, figure out the parts that are malfunctioning, that make us do things that we don't like, and then take those parts away or change them in some way, as if you can actually adapt and change who you are and what you are by altering your brain. In fact, he said, I referred to this in a previous talk, he said he was hoping that when we understand the brain enough, you could actually have like a log going backwards in your brain of all the times you told a lie. And he said it's important to be honest today, because in the future I'll be able to interrogate your brain and go back and tell you when you were lying. And I don't want to live in a world like that, where they change my brain so that I think more pure thoughts. Because that's George Orwell, that's Brave New World, it's just crazy, right? So I don't like that strain of thinking at all. I'd rather be me, even though I'm kind of a slightly messy, not perfect version of myself, than some homogenized, plain vanilla version. And it's interesting, I've talked about Ian Banks earlier on, A&M Banks, as he writes when he's writing science fiction. And his last novel before he died is about, it's called The Hydrogen Sonata, and it's about an alien race that's about to leave the universe completely and do what is called subliming and going to this other place. And the novel's really about what it means to sublime. In a sense, I mean, the man's dying as he's writing it. He's kind of talking about the afterlife before he's died. So.
And just one more thing, sorry. It's just interesting that you say that, because last week we had another presenter, David Pierce, and he was talking about transhumanism and the idea of abolishing pain and suffering in the mind. And he explained it, of course, to like a layman perspective, but one of the questions raised in class was, does that compromise like a person as an individual as being unique? And that's kind of what you're talking about now too, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, I know that one of the first times I brought this up with the medical class, one of the medical students said to me, but there's nobility in suffering, right? Like, it's a good thing to suffer. Like, you see people suffering all the time, and it's character building, and it's, you know, whatever. And I said, so tell me, like, take that argument to someone who's suffering right now, who's in pain right now, and say, I can take the suffering away, or you can keep on suffering so that we build your character for a bit longer. How many people would vote to keep on building their character? I mean, it's just, we've actually come up with this notion that suffering is in some way noble, when in fact it's just dopey. People shouldn't have to suffer.
I had read something a while ago. This is a little unrelated, but it's about mainly how internet is ruining our memory. Like, we're on the internet, we're looking at all these articles, and then we try to read a book and we can only focus for like 20 minutes or so. Have you ever had a patient or anyone come in and has this like interfered with the diagnosis, where it's like you can't distinguish whether or not he has an actual memory condition or it's just him abusing internet, if that makes sense?
I suppose maybe the question would be better asked of a neurologist or something, I suppose.
That's true.
Somebody who sees neurological conditions. I've never seen anything like that. I think that'd be fairly extreme, actually. I think if you want some examples if you want some examples about where the world is going like that, you have to kind of look outside North America. I was reading an article this morning about men and women in Japan, and the fact that they are basically abandoning the idea of sexual contact with other human beings. And in fact, most Japanese in sort of 20 to 30 age group are now single and don't have any interest in the other sex and aren't going to reproduce. And it's a massive problem for the Japanese government. You've got actually you've got a whole subset of teenagers in Japan who are actually showing the signs of, I think they're kind of describing it as a mental illness. People who are basically living on the internet and don't ever come out of their room. And it sounds like some sort of weird kind of rumor or weird kind of thing that you would hear in Japan, but it is actually happening. Like, people are having their primary relationship with their devices and not with their parents, not with their friends anymore. And the parents are bringing the food to the bedroom door, and the teenager's taking it in and they're never coming out. So, I mean, in some parts of the world it's becoming a real liability.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to start off, I'm a little biased here, but I just wanted to, say in defense of Toronto, I think if you look at the density map of the voting, I think pretty much like the entire GTA, so like the Greater Toronto area, was pro Rob Ford, and everybody in like the downtown core was against him, like across the board. But GTA's got like 3-4 million people.
I mean, what are we saying? Alberta has more photogenic mayors. There you go.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Well, I mean, anyways, there's a lot of crazy stuff with Rob Ford, so won't get into that. Oh, and then I also wanted to say in defense of the internet that as much as there is, cat and porn stuff on there, I honestly have to say that I don't think I'd be the same person that I am without it. I think we'd all wouldn't be, just because of the access to information. I mean, I download music, which is huge. I love music. I wouldn't have been able to afford to listen to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin discographies without the internet. movies, downloading movies. I don't mind reading online, so I download books. So it can be very enriching. But yes, there is that danger that you get addicted.
I agree 110%. I mean, all our families back in the UK, and we would go on the webcam every single Sunday and talk to my parents and my wife's parents as well. And I think if you look at the kind of the balance of what's come out of the internet, it's all positive, but all the positive things that come with some negative things too. So.
Yeah, I guess so. You get good and bad. One thing I wanted to ask you was, because you've really come out as like a skeptic of technology in the future, I was wondering what your stance was on, I guess, basic science research, because you had that quote with that Carl Sagan quote. So I was wondering what you thought about basic science research, maybe stuff that you wouldn't really be able to apply in 200 years or so. And I think it was, actually I just read today, I don't know what happened, but I think David Hubel, the guy that did the vision research, he just died recently. So I think that's a fitting question, I guess. Yeah, I think, I started out doing basic science research and worked with cells and different things in the lab when I was doing my surgical training. I have to say I respect basic science research because it's asking fairly fundamental questions, and they're fairly straightforward questions, and they're fairly hard to answer. I think actually the ignorance thing I was watching the other day on the TED Talk, the guy talked. I think it was Immanuel Kant he quoted, and he said basically we're asking questions as an ignorance generation technique. So we ask a question, we discover an answer, which breeds 2 more questions. And I think if you're waiting for basic science to tell us exactly how the body works, you're going to be waiting for a long, long time. It's extremely complicated. Like it's depressingly complicated. It's not going to be 5 years, 10 years, it might be 100 years. And maybe we'll be able to mathematically model a human brain and upload somewhere else before that ever happens. Because it turns out the body is very, very complicated. I mean, I'm somebody who basically attacks people while they're asleep with a very sharp knife, and it cuts out large chunks of them. That's what I do, right? But I've talked about before being a sledgehammer to crack a nut. There's something that happens at a molecular level that gives somebody a cancer. If we could understand that piece and switch it off, then you don't need then I'd be redundant. I'd be very happily redundant. But that's not going to happen for quite some time. Okay. Yeah, because I was just thinking that, I guess I was thinking in terms of basic science, I guess I would assume you'd need like several hundred years or something in order to really fundamentally understand something. But I was thinking of just something like spinal cord injury research, and I know that I remember there was another lecturer who said something that like maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, there was a big movement and everybody thought that, hey, we're going to cure spinal cord injury within a few years and it'd be all great. And then 10 years later, they say, no, it'll take a little bit longer. And then at this point in time, there isn't really, there's standard treatments, but there's a ton of different experimental things. And you have to take sort of like a cocktail approach in which there's ton of different drugs matched with rehab medicine and physiotherapy. So I guess my take on that is that there should be more fundamental research going into something that like just how do spinal cord neurons and interneurons react to different things. Yeah, but I don't know.
I would agree entirely. You hear this headline, breakthrough, medical breakthrough. In fact, the British newspapers are terrible for this. When I was home last week, you had the headline about cancer cure discovered, and then you finally hear from the scientist who's behind it, and they say, well, it's actually not what the headline said. It's a bit more complicated. It's for this one little thing over here, and maybe we had some effect that will do some different thing, and maybe in 3 or 4 years we'll be ready for a clinical trial, and then it probably won't work, and then we're back to square one again. So.
Somebody else.
So I'm kind of curious of what your point of view are on the European Brain Research Initiative that's just been launched. How much do you think we're going to get out of that? Are we close enough now where putting all this effort is going to generate something tangible very quickly?
I don't know. I haven't been following that myself. I mean, I think if I was to think, in kind of brain research in general, look at Kurzweil trying to figure out, he talks about there being layered, kind of a layered model of consciousness. I don't know. Again, it's terribly complicated. And it may be that you get sort of some basic working model of a brain, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now. I think it would need to be, you'd need to have a very clear idea of exactly what was going to happen before you would do anything substantive with that. I mean, I suppose if I was on the point of death and they said we want to upload your personality into an experimental brain, I might take it if I was about to die. But other than that, I'm not sure that it'd be sensible at all. So I'm kind of going ahead. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you tell me about the European Brain Project. I don't really know much about it.
It's 32 major groups that have gotten together and gotten a whole bunch of funding from the EU, and that's what I'm seeing, is that there's no real direction. It's just, yay, we're doing something.
Let's do the brain.
Yeah. But nothing substantial.
No, not that I'm aware of anyway.
Okay, here. Yeah, you mentioned distraction and different, change in generations where, maybe somebody that's farming out on the land, they don't really care about what's going on and they're happy. Whereas, here I live in the city, maybe, I got to be connected to all these different things in order to, feel at ease. I was just wondering whether you thought, the way I look at it, I guess, is that maybe these changes aren't necessarily bad, they're just different, and that I guess as long as the quality of life or the quality of interaction doesn't decrease, is it really so bad that we're on our cell phones that much more? Or
I think it's naive to say that a single thing is good or bad. Because I think everything has positive and negative effects. I just think it's important to be conscious of what's happening. And you kind of look around and say, well, how are things changing? And how are they likely to change in the future? Let's watch out to see where this is going. I've done studies on Facebook, and I've done how medical students use Facebook and how medical students use the iPhone and that sort of thing. I had something happen to me last week that hasn't happened in a long time. I sat down, and it occurred over 2 days, actually. I sat down and I read an entire book in about 2 days, from the start to the finish. Because I was in this special place called an airplane, flying from Belfast back to Edmonton again. And there was no internet available. It was a 9-hour flight, and I actually finished an entire book in 2 adjacent calendar days. And I do not remember the last time I did that, because I just don't have the time to sit down and not be distracted. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm probably much more productive than I would be if I didn't have the kind of connectivity that I do. But I think it's worthwhile to stop and say, that's an important thing, actually, that I stopped and I focused and I got things done. Because nobody could get to me because I was 33,000 feet up in the air.
If I could interject a little humor here. It's interesting that we make such rapid decisions now. If you're watching YouTube and, just sort of fooling around, your decision to keep watching a YouTube video is made in somewhere between 3 and 6 seconds. And, if it's somehow just not satisfying you, you're on to the next task. So you and I have both done comparable videos in the last year. And it's very interesting how much better you are than I am in capturing people in those first 6 seconds. That it isn't a skill we ever needed before, probably. That if you were only impressive if somebody stayed in your sight for 30 seconds, that was fine, in the past. But now it really matters whether you can seem intriguing and cool and watchable in the first three 3 to 6 seconds.
One of the candidates in the mayoral race last night, right, got an endorsement from Lemmy, from Motorhead, right?
Yeah.
And he put it on his Facebook page, and he got 1 million likes. And I think he came like dead last in the election, right? So there's a difference between capturing attention and keeping attention, I think.
Yes, yeah. So you may be familiar with the phenomenon of Nerd Night. Actually, Ross here was one of the people presenting in the very first Edmonton Nerd Night, and I'm presenting there on November 28th. It seems to me right somehow, with all these open questions that we can't find an answer to, maybe making fun of them is a very healthy thing to do, and you've done some of that today. You know, I think humor is not, it's sort of like poetry, it's not completely ancillary, unnecessary part of life. It's a very necessary part of life. And it's a way of, you know, confronting fears that we really don't want to confront seriously head on. So humor helps with that. Okay, other questions? We have 6 minutes left, guys.
I've got one quick question. I know I always hog this, and it probably really annoys people, but I'm a big fan of science fiction too. What's your favorite sci-fi novel, if you had to pick one, or movie?
Sci-fi novel? That's a hard one. There's too many good ones, actually.
Yeah, probably. I guess maybe even author would probably be easier to pick. I don't know.
Philip K. Dick's hard to beat, actually. If I had to pick a single Philip K. Dick, I'd probably pick maybe Ubik, maybe the Transfiguration of what do you call him, Eldridge Palmer, or I didn't like some of the speculative stuff like Valis. Actually, if you want to read some really good stuff, I'd recommend Ian Banks, like the very first one. Consider Phlebas. I think it's very good. Okay. And best science fiction movie ever, Aliens 2, James Cameron. Aliens 2, yeah, totally. Oh no, you got to see it with the Colonial Marines. No, you got to see Alien 2. Well, not Aliens, not Alien 2, Aliens plural. Sorry, that's the second one. The second one. No, sadly. I saw it. I went to see it in the movies, but it didn't make any narrative sense, in my humble opinion.
I have another question. In terms of your questions that you posed for us, what do we think the future should look like, and what do we actually think it's going to be like? Those are tough questions. I'm very much like a socialist in terms of my views. So the future I hope for is one where people see more equality. But when I try to put those ideas in comparison with reality, it doesn't seem like that's probably going to happen. So I just wonder, like, with your knowledge about technology in the future, what do you think is a reasonable understanding of what the future might be like in the next 10 or 20 years?
I think it'll be a cobbled together amalgam of people trying to do their best. I mean, to come back to science fiction authors, or I suppose maybe more fantasy authors, Terry Pratchett, in one of his early books, said there's no justice, there's just us. So it's kind of up to us to actually decide where this is going to go, and that means you've got to be the person who stands up and says, this is where I think we should go, this is an important thing that we should focus on, this is, you know, good for the people that my local community or this area that I'm trying to help. That's why I think Kim's work that he's doing in Nepal is very impressive, because it's not just looking after yourself, it's looking after other people. I think certainly, I mean, I've had a very fortunate life so far, and I would quite like to be able to give things back to people and try and even just move the ball down the pitch a little bit. That's kind of why I do what I do.
My question is gonna be for the scientific fiction. We usually scientists usually get lots of ideas from the scientific fictions, but the thing is there's a controversial questions. How could we believe that? Because some of the time they just the imagination is not, there is no science basis or science fundament, and we usually don't believe that. But actually, when we say we don't believe that, there are two reasons. One is actually incorrect. Another thing is maybe we haven't thought about that. Like before the Einstein was born, people all believed that all the physical words are like Newton's words, not the Einstein's words. So how do you consider about that question?
Yeah, I think that's more of a comment than a question. Yeah, because I mean, that's why it's nice to be alive. You never know quite what's coming down the road, right? You might think you've got a good understanding of this, like Peter Higgs and the Higgs boson, right? What 50 years ago Higgs said there's this subatomic particle that makes the whole thing work, and nobody believed him. And it took 50 years for them to demonstrate it, like to find the first one, and then he won the Nobel Prize. So he actually thought of something that did not objectively exist, and then was proven right down the road. So you never know what's coming.
Hey, thank you for a really excellent teaching session. On Thursday, we have quantum biology from Jack Tazinski, so that should be quite interesting too.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Yeah, thank you.